we're going to talk particularly about something that Shannon brought up yesterday, which is our cleaning reports that we use at the help desk. So we have a few relatively strict policies here in our department that the help desk is relied on to enforce across the commission. So I'm going to be talking about the approach and the attitude and procedures we take for those corrections. And to frame that, I'm going to be talking about broken windows theory. Has anybody heard of broken windows theory before? Not one? Okay. So broken windows theory basically says that disorder invites further disorder. So the analogy goes that if you are walking down a street and you see a house with a brick thrown through the window, that tells you that nobody is really caring for that property, nobody's really watching over it, and so you are more likely to pick up another brick and throw it through another window. So the appearance of disorder invites further disorder at its essence. So as a formal theory, broken windows got its start with an experiment by a Stanford sociologist called Philip Zimbardo in 1969, and he did an experiment where he took two cars, like you see right here, and put the hood up, just like you see, as if the car was in disrepair, and he put them in two neighborhoods. He put one in downtown Bronx in New York, and one in the middle of an upscale neighborhood in Palo Alto, California. And he left them there for a week. Within 24 hours, I'm sure it's no surprise, the one in the Bronx had been stripped completely. The tires, the rims, the engine components, everything had been stripped out of that car within 24 hours. A week later, in Palo Alto, California, nobody had touched the car. The interesting part comes because after that week, Philip Zimbardo went out there and took a sledgehammer and busted the window out of the car in Palo Alto, California. And after he did that, within 24 hours, the car in Palo Alto had been stripped completely as well. And so the lesson here is not that it matters your neighborhood or your socioeconomic background or all those typical root causes that we attribute to this kind of disorder. Rather, it seems to be that the mere appearance of disorder invites people to bring more disorder because they know that nobody's watching, nobody cares about this, nobody's going to stop them if they do it. Okay? So this was formalized into a criminal theory by two authors, James Wilson and George Keller, and they codified it into a formal theory of criminality that had two basic premises. Okay? First is that the deterrence of petty crime requires a proactive, zero tolerance, and overwhelming response. Okay? So your smallest crimes you need to meet with seemingly overwhelming force, and that's that kind of nip it in the bud strategy, right? Stop it before it starts, when it's small. And the second, harder to prove part is that the deterrence of these petty crimes further reduces the major crime rate and improves the overall quality of life. So by stopping these petty crimes when they start, you don't escalate to things like that car getting stripped down completely. You make sure you keep the windows repaired, you're not going to invite that further disorder onto yourself. So probably the most visible example or visible success of broken windows theory policing was in New York City in the late 80s and, well, mostly early 90s. Is anybody familiar with New York of the 1980s? Anybody go visit New York in the 1980s? How nice was it?
Not very.
Not very, okay? So New York in the 1980s was characterized by one of the largest or highest crime rates across the country and the highest murder rates almost in the world. And this is for a city whose population was bordering on 12 million people. And they had among the highest petty crime rates and capital crime rates. There was rampant violence. You can see from the pictures here that it began to affect their infrastructure as well. So particularly the subway system had people fare dodging, had graffiti all over the cars. The cars were in disrepair. They often broke, and people started noticing this, and so they stopped using the subway. So that in turn made fewer subway revenues, which means they didn't have the budget to upkeep even further, and it started creating this downward spiral with the subway system until you get results like you see right here in these pictures. And the general consensus among everybody was that this is just how it was going to be, that these were unsolvable problems, that New York City was too big, too varied, too diverse to manage these problems, and this is just what happens when you put 12 million people that close together. You're going to get these kind of problems. Well, in 1993, officially, but started in 1994, New York City got a new mayor, Rudy Giuliani, and the first thing Rudy Giuliani did when he got into office was overturn the police department, and he hired a new police chief, Bill Bratton, and Bratton was a proponent of broken windows theory, and he in fact hired one of the authors, George Keller, to come work for him and consult on how his police force was to implement this broken windows theory. So they focused, and Giuliani and Bratton took incredible heat for this decision. They publicized the fact that they were going to go after these small crimes, and everybody was up in arms saying, are you kidding? You're going to crack down on fare dodging when we have the highest murder rate in the Western world? How can you focus on that when we've got all these big problems going on? And Bratton and Giuliani and Keller's response was broken windows theory. If we police these small things, the rest of the dominoes will fall and we'll start to see things improve. And so they focused on things like graffiti on the railway cars. And they took, like I said before, an overwhelming approach to these graffiti cars. So what they would do is they would whitewash all the graffiti off of these subway cars, and then Bratton would station officers to sit by the subway cars, and as soon as the graffiti artists would come by and put their tag on, they would get up and re-whitewash it. And so by the time the artists got up the next day or wanted to see their subway car, see their work of art, they just saw it whitewashed again. And they would get up and put their tag on it again, and the next morning it'd be gone again. And they continued to do this until they broke the spirits of the graffiti artists, and they stopped doing it. They also cracked down on squeegee men. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. In traffic, it might seem like they're providing a service, but taken too far, they'll just do it for you, and then they demand money, and then they start to threaten or possibly get violent, and so they crack down on getting these squeegee men off the street. They implemented policies for quicker arrests, so they didn't want the paperwork to have to bog down any of their officers for booking people, so they really streamlined the arrest process, built forms to help it go faster, built booking processes and routing techniques to help make sure that we can process those arrests faster. They stationed officers in the subway cars themselves to do nothing more than to stand there. And they just rode the subway cars up and back, up and back, up and back. And Bratton's theory was that just the mere presence of the police officer would stop some people from some of those smaller crimes. They cracked down on things like public drinking and public urination to help keep an orderly appearance around the city. And they cracked down on fare dodging, turnstile jumping, and things like that began to be a big problem in the New York subway system, and that also has the added benefit of making sure you boost your revenues with everybody paying too. So they cracked down on fare dodging and turnstile jumping. So what kind of results did they see? Well, they saw overwhelming success, and by the year 2000, the petty crime rate had fallen by 40%, but the by 50%, sorry, but the violent crime rate had also correspondingly dropped by 40% by the year 2000. Just astronomical numbers not seen any time in the history of New York City or any major city of that size before. Just an incredible drop in these crime rates. And many people, it's starting to be debated about other socioeconomic factors that contributed to it, but many people point to the broken windows policing theory as a primary reason or a primary contributor for that crime rate drop. And now when you go on the New York subway, it looks much more like this than those pictures you see in the 80s. So the cars are kept clean, they're kept running, there's bright lights. They don't have to station those officers anymore. They stopped, that was called Operation Watch, and they stopped Operation Watch back in 2006 because they didn't need the police officers anymore. Nobody was doing these crimes anymore. So they saw overwhelming results in New York City from implementing this broken windows theory. So, how does that relate to us? Well, we have tons of broken windows in class. All kinds, and we have all kinds in our class database right over there. And the types of broken windows we see are things like old data, incomplete rentals, not being able to complete your sessions, mistyped addresses, registering for the wrong course, forgetting to withdraw, not requesting a refund, right? All sorts of areas where we can have little gaps, little holes in our overall organization that start to contribute to that deterioration, right? And customers start to see it too. So they start to see our front desk staff say, no, don't worry about it. I'll print that for you next time. Or, nah, computer's not really working right now. Just go ahead and go into the weight room, okay? And so those broken windows that we see in class make their way down to the front lines and are visible to our customers in most cases. And these small, seemingly small things quickly escalate. And I'm sure all of you have been a part of something where it comes, this is the first you're hearing about it, and it comes onto your plate, and the first thing you think is, how could this possibly get to this point? How did nobody notice this before? And I'm going to share 2 examples that we've seen in the past year where we had that exact reaction. How could it possibly get to this point? One of them, we had a facility who just recently reopened, and about 9 months after they reopened, the aquatics director from down there called me or sent us an email and said, where's all my money? I don't have any revenue. We haven't collected any revenue for the past 9 months. And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So when I dug into it a little bit further, I found out that when they closed down, there was a decision made to, there was the aquatics facility that closed down first. So there was a decision made with all their memberships and courses and everything like that, while the fitness center was still temporarily open, to point all their GLs to fitness, because that was all they were doing. Well, when we reopened, you think we remembered to change it back to aquatics? No. Not a chance. And so there were 3 years worth of revenue. Now, they were closed for about 1.5 years of that time, but there were about 3 years worth where we were sending everything to fitness and nothing to aquatics. And nobody noticed for 3 years. We had another case with one of our ongoing rental clients where we just learned that they have a $10,000 outstanding balance that they're not going to be able to pay. And they just said, sorry, we can't. We don't have the money. And we're still, of course, in negotiations with them to try to meet somewhere in the middle. But the question on our end was, how do you let them rack up a $10,000 balance in services without anybody picking up the phone and saying, hey, we need to collect this. We need to get on this. And so these are the type of things that you see and you're like, holy crap, how am I going to deal with this, right? And these are analogous to the major crimes going on in New York. And everybody's screaming at you to solve these big problems. And what I'm here to try to convince you of today is that while these problems do need solving and your director's going to come banging on your door to solve these big ticket problems, we certainly can't ignore these. But prevention of these type of things starts at a very basic level, and it starts with building a culture of broken windows theory policing so that people know, this is going to sound awful, but know that they're being watched, right? Know that somebody's checking on these things so that as soon as they get to $2,000, they know that it's not good practice. They've heard from us 100 times, don't take a registration without payment. So when they get up to $2,000, they're like, maybe I should call the help desk and try to figure this out. So in practice, at the help desk, you will find that the broken windows theory really permeates our culture, and it started with that guy right over there. Before he even knew that it was an actual real theory called broken windows, he was a huge, and still is, a huge proponent of taking every single little detail, leaving no stone unturned when you have a solution, looking at it from all angles, making sure you fix not only the big things, but all the tiny little things that lead up to it too. So all of our help desk staff that you just saw over there are brought up in this broken windows culture to not brush anything under the rug. If you see a problem, either fix it or put it on somebody's plate that can fix it. Don't ignore problems. Insert yourselves into the process and help to repair those broken windows whenever you see them. So, and as we go through these next couple examples, I'm going to refer to my staff and field staff. So when if I say something like my staff, I mean the people in that room over there and the other managers here. And like I said, we absolutely are all in on broken windows theory. I'm also going to refer to the field staff. When I say field staff, I mean our programmers, recreators, facility directors, all those people out in the field that are also using class, but I'm not directly involved with them. And so we apply broken windows theory not only to those users out in the field, but to ourselves as well and how we manage ourselves. And so some examples of how this plays out in our help desk is we have a very strict uniform policy. You saw the uniform over there, the beige shirts, the black pants. You have to have black shoes, belt, all that good stuff, shirt tucked in. And if you are late without calling one day, or you show up out of uniform in the wrong shirt or wearing sneakers or something like that, we send you home. You're not working that day. And a lot of times it puts us at a disadvantage for that day. More work falls onto these people right here, but we're sending that message to our part-time that the buck stops here. If you can't get the uniform right, I'm not going to trust you with an account adjustment. So we are very strict up front with even our small policies to show them that we mean business when it comes to the bigger stuff. We have a process that they do every day where we run the account payments due report for the day previous and find out how many balances were generated in our class system. Usually it's between a dozen and 20 balances that were generated, so somebody registers and the customer decides against it, but they forget to withdraw, and so it leaves an outstanding balance. Our staff calls the staff member who made that registration, or if they're not there, calls their manager and says, hey, Joe just did a registration, looks like Joe did a registration yesterday, but he didn't take any payment for it. Do you know anything about it? And so we show them almost immediately that we're paying attention to those registrations and that you need to be taking payment for those. And probably the most complex and most visible example of broken windows theory at the help desk is our cleaning reports process. And that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the time here, are the different cleaning reports that we implement at the help desk to try to stay on top of these broken windows. So what is a cleaning report? A cleaning report, as defined by yours truly in the help desk, is a crystal report that's designed to help you find and repair these broken windows in your organization or in your, particularly in your class database for the examples that we're going to look at. So it's to help you locate and then provide steps to repair these different broken windows that you find.
So let me stop and say, for those that were here yesterday, that's the importance of all those layers that we built on when we talked about building your own export and getting into that data. The minute you pull this out, we have cleaning reports for all kinds of other software that we use. So it's not just for this. It's isolating the problems in any database, and the tool that we've chosen, and that was provided to us by class or Active was the crystal reports. But I would encourage you, it doesn't just apply to class. Running these reports, exception reports, it's so incredibly helpful because half the time when you have a problem, it seems like a monster, but once you narrow it down, it seems doable, right? Because you only really have a problem with a subset of your data.
Yeah, thank you for that, because that's a good point. The examples I'm going to be showing are from class, but I'm sure it's pretty obvious at this point. The broken windows theory is generally applicable to whatever you're working on. So that's a very important point. For the cleaning reports that I'm going to talk about, they have three characteristics, or three primary components, and that's going to be scope, frequency, and action. Okay? Those are the three things that you need to think about when you're going to create a cleaning report. So, scope. The scope is what particular problem or subset of data that this addresses. So what problem is it that you're trying to fix? And some questions to ask yourself when you're thinking about the scope of your cleaning report is, who does it apply to? Do I want to check all the accounts in my database, or do I just need to check on aquatics registrations? Do I need to check on all facilities or just facilities that had a booking last weekend? So you really want to ask yourself what subset of data it is that you want to check. And now one cautionary tale there, when in doubt, cast your net wide, okay? Because if you make a report to check to make sure you have a security deposit on each one of your venue rentals, and one of your staff just places an admin booking instead of creating a full rental, and all you're doing is checking the actual functions themselves, you're not going to see that admin booking, right? So it's probably better to start with that facility and just see what bookings are in that facility to begin with. So you want to make sure that you're casting that wide when you're deciding what subset of data you want to check. The next thing you want to consider is the time period. So we'll see this in a couple examples in a second, but it can take a long time, depending on the size of your database, to run through all your records. So if you don't need to check all accounts that have been created in the history of your database, then don't. Put a time parameter on it to limit it to just accounts created in the last week or accounts created in the last month. So use time and think about what time period you actually need to check to narrow down your data. And then the final thing to ask is whether you want to only show errors or whether you want to show all the data. So some things are not as simple as flipping a switch, a 0 or a 1. Some things you just want to put in front of the eyes of your programmer and say, check this over, make sure this is right. And so we'll see examples of both types of cleaning reports. Examples that have ones that only show errors and you just keep running it until it's clean and blank, or ones that just show data and whoever's running it is expected to read it and interpret it. The next characteristic is frequency. This is pretty simple. It's how often should the cleaning report be run. So for a lot of the examples that I'm going to be showing you, these are run every single day. They're daily cleaning reports that we have at the help desk. But to help you decide what the frequency should be, the first thing you want to ask is, what is the net result of inaction? So if you're designing a cleaning report to make sure that all outstanding credits have had a refund requested, if you don't run that report for a matter of months, you're going to have a lot of customers calling you wondering where their refunds are, right? So you don't want to let that one sit for a month. If you've got a cleaning report where you just check that all your rentals are completed, you might have some problems because of not returning security deposits or something, but if you've just got a bunch of uncompleted rentals, that doesn't do too much except have a bunch of uncompleted rentals. Okay, so you want to ask yourself, what happens if I don't do anything? If I don't do anything, what bad things happen, and how often do I need to do this to prevent those bad things from happening? So if you tell your customers that they can expect a refund within 1 to 2 weeks from the time they withdraw, then you want to make sure you're running that refund request cleaning report at least once a week. Make sure you stay on top of those. And the other thing to consider is, what workload can my unit accept? So we've talked a lot about how a lot of the agencies at this conference don't necessarily have the resources of an organization like Prince George's County or the other ones that we've seen. So before you design all sorts of awesome cleaning reports, you better make sure that you've got staff that can run it and clean it. Otherwise, it's just an exercise in futility. So make sure you have an understanding of what workload your unit can accept, and you're designing your cleaning reports to not overtax them. And then finally, action. And action is, what is the corrective action that needs to be taken in order to consider this clean or fixed? And so, again, one thing to help you in your decision making is you have two options when it comes to who fixes it, right? Either you can fix it or somebody else can fix it. So if you fix it, there are some benefits. If you want it done right, do it yourself, right? That's how the saying goes. So there are some benefits to just having cleaning reports that you run and fix. You can make sure it's done right. You know when it was last run. You know how often you're running it. You can really manage it very closely if you're the one doing the cleaning. If you have somebody else doing the cleaning for you, whether it's part-time staff or whether it's staff out in the field, that's kind of a double-edged sword. Okay, you'll need to check up on it to make sure that it's actually being run and being run properly. But you do get some education on the other end as well. So if they're expected to go in and request that refund, then the next time they do a withdrawal, they know that they're going to get an email from you asking to request the refund, so they're going to do it as they do the withdrawal. So if you keep it with yourself, you know it's done right, you know it's done well, but you don't get any of that educational aspect, and until you decide to spread it out to other people, you're going to be the only one running that, and the only person that knows how to do that. And then the other thing to watch out for when you're talking about your corrective action is to make sure it's not just a Band-Aid, right? So we have, we talked a little bit about our ACR system yesterday, 2 days ago? 2 days ago. We talked about our ACR system. And we have a cleaning report that makes sure none of the cases run past their expected completion date. So it would not be a good action for that cleaning report to just go in and move the expected completion date to tomorrow for all of those cases, right? We're just applying a Band-Aid in that case so that the report comes back clean, but we haven't really addressed the root of the problem. So you want to make sure that whatever corrective action you have actually addresses the root of the problem and doesn't just clean your report for you. So, our cleaning reports at the help desk, and we've got a bunch. And I remember, I think I gave Shannon the list of our cleaning reports 2 years ago when we were at Charleston, but the list has grown, so you may want some more. And then this is for everybody else who has not seen all of our cleaning reports. So we break them up into 3 tiers. We have our basic cleaning reports first, and I know you can't read these, but I'll be happy to provide the list or the actual reports for anybody that needs them. Okay, so our basic cleaning reports, this is what we use to train our new help desk staff members, in fact. And these cover things like cleaning addresses, making sure names are capitalized properly, making sure the facilities have the right internet display settings on them, making sure every course has a GL account attached, all of these little basic things that don't take that much class knowledge to complete. And so these are, in fact, the very first thing that a new help desk staff member does is the address component cleaning report that we're going to see in just a second. And not only does that help familiarize them with the class database, but it helps familiarize them with our address policies and things like that. Moving on, we have our advanced that are run by our more veteran help deskers there, which are some more complicated class procedures. So these are things like making sure the ages on the courses are matched properly and checking our rentals to make sure that we've saved each and every one of those echo signs that we talked about earlier. And we'll get into a couple more of the advanced ones here in a sec. And then finally, our last tier is our manager reports. And these are run by people in this room with the pink shirts on. And they are reserved for manager level for one of 2 reasons. One, because we need to make sure it gets done and gets done regularly. So you'll see in that list our POS web sales report. So we run a report to check for any gift cards that are sold on POS web because we need to mail them out a gift card. And we got burned, actually, when we weren't checking that. And we had a customer call us that said, hey, I ordered a gift card a month ago, and I haven't seen it. What's going on? So after that happened, we built a cleaning report and put it in the managers to make sure they stayed on top of that.
So this is just like that echo sign that we talked about yesterday. When we have a problem, when we encounter, a lot of these are set up, some of it is broken windows theory, right? So the easy stuff like making sure that people are putting the names in with capital, a capital first letter, right? Or not all caps, right? You're not shouting somebody's name. Those are just simple things that we started with that are those broken windows theories. But as you go through the advanced, these are all ones where I got my hand slapped or we got our hand slapped in some scenario where, all right, well, we realize now that we have to make sure that we have POS web receipts firing, or we have to make sure that, I saw one on there that struck my fancy, that people are putting their course fees in right. We have, for years, made policies in this organization that are unenforceable. They're absolutely unenforceable. And those, as soon as people realize that they are unenforceable, it becomes very difficult. You just have this expectation. You're looking at a customer in the face and saying, here's what's supposed to happen. And they go, well, that didn't happen, right? So these are the things that help us to make sure that we are doing what we say we are doing.
Help keeps things moving. And so the one reason that we just talked about for saving something for a manager level or a higher level would be if you need to make sure that you run it regularly, like those POS web receipts. The other reason why you might want to reserve a cleaning report for a manager level is if they have to interface with some sort of senior management. You'll see the non-offering facility withdrawal. We've got a policy in our agency that the offering facility, the facility that's offering that course, has to process that withdrawal. And if they break that policy, you're often calling a facility director and saying, hey, you really broke policy here, right? And they don't really take too kindly if they get a $10 hourly employee calling them to tell them how to do their job, is how they see it, right? So they don't make those calls, right? We save that for a manager level, so that way we got a full-time talking to a full-time, career talking to career, whenever you need to talk about those sticky policy situations. So we're going to get into a couple of these particular reports, and we're going to start with some of our basic reports. And first up, as I mentioned, was address components. And this report checks to make sure that all of our addresses are properly formatted. So this is an example of what the cleaning report looks like up top. And so Daniel T. Barnes shows up at 1890 South Addison Road in District Heights. And that would show up if the address is formatted as you see right below, right? So we use the address components. The street number is supposed to go in the street number box above it. Drive is supposed to be in DR in that box to the right. And this user just put everything in the address first line. Okay? So this causes problems. The broken windows type problems that this causes is if we were to generate a mailing label, this wouldn't work right. If we were to search for all customers that live on DMAR Drive, this wouldn't work right. Okay? So there are a number of problems that this could cause down the road. So we catch it as soon as they make it. And we run this twice daily. Or I'm going to wait for that because I got that formally. So the scope. The scope of the address report is all of our accounts from all time. We need to make sure that every single one of our accounts has a properly formatted address for those reasons I was just mentioning. So it checks every single account that's been created in our class database, but it only shows the ones that have an address component error, right? So we've got, I don't know, maybe 100,000 or so different accounts in there. We don't want to check each single address to make sure it's all in the right spot. So this only shows ones that have those address component errors. As I mentioned, we run it twice daily over there at the help desk to try to catch it as it's happening, right? Because if we see a user that shows up 2 or 3 times in a row on this, if we catch it half an hour after it happened, a lot of times they're still working, and we can pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I saw you just created 2 or 3 accounts, but the addresses were a little off. Like, do you know do you know the policy? Do you know where it's supposed to go? Can I walk you through it? So we're able to take immediate action while that staff is still working on that shift to help try to correct it. And the correction in this case is pretty easy. We just move it to the right places. So like I said, this is one of those cases where we just correct it on our end. It's really not worth it a lot of times to chase somebody down for 3 or 4 days just to try to get them to move a house number in class, right? So we make the corrections here. But like I said, if we see a particular user pop up 3 or 4 times in a row, we're going to give that facility a call and make sure they're aware of the policy. Next up is our verification document display report. We have a policy here in our department that every account holder needs to verify their age with us. They need to verify residency too, but this one particularly checks age, and they have to verify it with a particular document. So we have a list of acceptable documents, things like a driver's license, passport, well, I can't remember any of the other ones. Driver's license, passport, yeah, birth certificate, baptismal certificate, so on and so forth. And what this report checks is it finds all accounts that were created in that time frame, says what they used to verify their age. So in this case, they used the driver's license, and then it puts the verification document number that they're supposed to record. So this helps us because we use that verification document number to verify the identity of a customer if they call in. If they call into our call center and want to discuss anything about their accounts, they have to give us the last 3 digits of their driver's license or their family PIN. We'll accept either of those as verification to start talking about their account with them. So we need to make sure that those are properly, that information is in there properly in order to complete our processes over at the help desk. So we run this report every single day, and we go down this column right here and make sure that we don't see 0000000 or A or nothing. Okay? So talking about this officially, again, the scope is all class accounts. Okay, so any accounts that were created. However, we narrow the time period, right? Because we don't want to have to check all accounts in our database every time we run this. If we ran this report yesterday and it was clean yesterday, then we just need to make sure that the accounts created from yesterday into today are also clean. So we've got kind of a rolling process on this to make sure that, or to help us not have to check all accounts every time we run this. So we run it for a time period. Again, this one's run twice daily, and you run it to the day before. And this is an example of one of those reports that does not clear off correct accounts, right? So you're going to see, even if they did it properly, as we see here, this top one, that's properly verified. That checks out. That's okay. It still shows up on the report because we don't have discrete enough logic to pull out errors out of there in a way that's foolproof. So we just catch everything, and we go down that list and make sure that all of them created are cleaned up. All right, so talking about advanced reports, we talked about EchoSign yesterday. We've got a report that checks to make sure for every single rental created by the Park Permits Office or by our help desk that we have saved that signed EchoSign rental agreement into the folder. If it hasn't been saved, then you'll get this red message right here that says file not found. And our staff is expected to go find that PDF EchoSign, maybe download it again from the web, and save it into the folder.
So some of you guys that haven't tuned out of our conversation may be saying, well, how do you run the EchoSign against a file structure? Right? It's not, we're not running against the class database there. He just said that we were running the EchoSign check to make sure that we have a document saved in a folder. Well, I mean, class gave us these tools and told us to learn them. So as soon as we started building on our knowledge, you know, we discovered that you can use Crystal Reports to run against anything. Excel files, access databases, file structure. So when we started the EchoSign process, I said, you know, this is great. We were talking about whether we were going to implement it, and I said, this is great. But the minute that we run, that we have a rental problem, and I don't have an EchoSign, that's all been for naught, because I'm making it so that when I do have a problem, I can say, it says here you can't have a move house, right? But if I don't have that signed document, it's all been worthless, because 95% of the people that come in and do our rentals live by our agreement, or at least I can't prove that they didn't live by our agreement, right? They have those buildings and those keys. So we had to make a process that said, did you do your job? Did you make sure you have an EchoSign? And so, you know, there's a setting in Crystal Reports to run it off a file structure. So we have the Crystal Report that we run to check to see that you either, in this case, it doesn't always mean you don't have it saved. You could have saved it with the wrong name because it's looking for it based on a parsed name. So I just wanted to share that. If you were paying attention, then that would have made sense.
I have a question.
Sure.
About the documentation I've been asking.
Sure.
Where are you saving the information that your documentation?
It's a custom prompt. Yeah, so we have
Client, an account
client custom prompts. Yeah, we have 4 client custom prompts that are required for all accounts. It's ADA yes or no question, and then if so, specify, and then these 2 right here, verification document and document number.
If we had to do it over again, I'm sure we'd do it different. But that's what we're doing.
I was trying to figure out how you can do it. And that's what I think.
And the
Just out of curiosity, privacy issues with somebody
People try to give us their social security numbers all the time. They won't
trying to give it to you.
please do not give it.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. We start with the driver's license number, and then Laura came in, and she's a big privacy advocate. Not that that's wrong. I'm just kidding. But, so now we only take the last 4. We used to take the whole string. But it's not fun. But the point there is that we've had larger issues, right? This is just a response to a problem. We had a father who did not have rights to his child. Now, I know how it works in the community centers, right? Somebody walks into a community center and says, where's my kid? I'm picking up my kid. And sometimes, depending on how they approach it, we're real, you know, like, oh, let's go get the kid. You know, we don't check whose child it is, and we got in real big trouble. He did not have any custody. So he calls up and he says, hey, I want to know where my kid's taking swim lessons. I just can't remember where it is or where I need to go pick him up. Guess what? He had a restraining order, was not supposed to pick up the kid, goes, we have a whole issue now, so then we have to put in practice something, and it's not perfect, but it's something that says, now if you walk down to the community center down there at College Park Community Center and ask them for your barcode and PIN number, they might just give it to you without asking. They're not supposed to. We train them not to. But when they call in, we won't talk to them unless they can prove something that says something about their account based on how they verified their account. And that gets us into a lot more customer issues than probably the ones we stave off. But we know that the one issue that we stave off is going to be a really big problem, right? Exactly. So customers get peeved, right? I know when I call up and call up my credit card, or call up the bank, or call up AT&T, and it's in my wife's name, and they're like, "Can you tell me the last 4 digits of your wife's social security number?" Or I can't give you any information. I'm like, is there anything else I can verify with? I get that kind of frustration, and our customers definitely do. But as privacy advocates have spread through the world, more and more people are a little more understanding when you say, "Hey, for your protection as a county taxpayer, you put the guilty form, and I really can't, for your safety, I can't provide any information."
So I got the red light to get off like 10 minutes ago, so I'm going to speed through the rest of these. The next one I want to cover, so the big takeaway from that EchoSign was the ability to run it on that file structure. So it checks a rental in class, and then for every rental it sees in class, it makes sure we have a PDF document saved. So the big takeaway there was that you can run it on multiple data sources. Next up is the non-offering facility withdrawal. I mentioned that we have a policy here in our agency that withdrawals have to be processed by the offering facility. This dates back to that decentralized model I was talking about yesterday, where everybody was kind of their own silos. One holdover from that is that we want to make sure those facilities are aware of any withdrawals that happen, and our facilities have been notoriously poor at sharing information between each other. So we implemented a policy that if you want to withdraw, you have to go to the facility offering that course so that they are aware of the withdrawal and can plan their programs accordingly. So this is what it shows up like on the report. You have the offering facility, in this case our Rolling Crest Chill and Splash Pool, and somebody from our Berwyn Heights Community Center, right down the road here, withdrew a client from a Rolling Crest course, and that's against policy according to our policy. So rather than take any action, like re-register the customer in that course, right? Because they might have, most likely they probably did want to withdraw from that course. So re-registering them just creates more of a problem, right? At this point, the milk's already spilled. They've already been withdrawn. Yes, it was against policy, but most likely they wanted to withdraw. Maybe they've already requested a refund. So if you put the brakes on this process at this point, you might cause more customer aggravation than you prevent. So in these cases, what we do is just send an FYI, like you see right here. So this is the notice that Carlos sent out to the directors of Rolling Crest saying, hey, just a heads up, somebody from Berwyn Heights withdrew somebody from one of your swimming courses. I don't know if you were aware of this or not, but we just wanted to make sure that you were, in case you need to cancel the program if it's below minimum now or something like that. So they just get a heads up from us saying, by the way, somebody from Berwyn Heights just withdrew somebody from your course. So scope, all withdrawals not done by the help desk here. We run that one once daily. And again, the action is just that email notice that you saw. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about are what we call the DEET and the DER. And that stands for Data Entry Error Tool and Data Entry Review Report. And I'm going to focus mostly on the first one, Data Entry Error Tool. But these are two gigantic, broad sweeping reports that are intended to find any and all programmatic errors before we print our guide publications, right?
So why don't you set the problem? Maybe you're going to do that.
Okay.
But, I think it's worthwhile because this one was one of our biggest booms that we've. It hasn't been. I wouldn't say it's been hugely well received, but because the field staff are now more accountable. But here's the problem, and I think I mentioned this on Monday for those of you that were here. We frequently would get data that was entered into the guide, and I talked to Bill about this on Monday night actually, because they have an interesting data entry issue. But the data that the programs do, does everyone here have their programmers do their programming? It looks, Bill has them submit it on a spreadsheet, and then he has staff to enter it. But our staff enter it. How do you guys do it? You have the programmers do it, right? And that's really, that's a real win. Except, and there are, without a doubt, really great programmers that do a really good job of this. But there are some staff that you have that are less good. And so what we ended up with, though, was a significant amount of really upset customers who would look at something in the guide, and then if something was published either incorrectly, like so, for instance, they would put, and we didn't used to check this, they would put the program starting at midnight, right? It seems pretty, no one was showing up at midnight, but guess what happened over here? Phone rings. Hey, it says here that the trip is leaving for Seven Springs Ski Resort at midnight. Is that right? And we don't have any of that information. All we can see is what's in the guide. So we got to stop and call. And so it created this whole thing. And it got really bad, right? We had some situations where parents are like, hey, I showed up at this community center for my guitar lesson, and it's dark. There's nobody here. And it's because the staff incorrectly put a facility in wrong. Oh, yeah, and they work in a silo, right? So they're like, oh, yeah, all of our people know that we moved, Tiny Tots over here. I'm like, no, there's 3 people that signed up online that live, 15 miles away that aren't in your neighborhood. Oh, right? So we had to deal with this issue. And this meant we had to put the programmers in a bit of a box. And this has been, so that kind of sets the stage for what we did next.
Yeah, so this was not just a cleaning report. This was introduced as part of a agency-wide push to try to correct those problems Len was talking about. Everybody in the agency recognized this as a problem, and nobody was bold enough to say, no, we don't need to worry about it. Everybody recognized it as a problem, and our area ops people, our programmers were on board to try to correct this problem too, but they came back to us and said, listen, part of the problem is the way we had the old guide production schedule. They would submit all their courses during a rollover period. Then we would ask them politely to not put any more in for a period of time where we could go in and check some of the data. Public Affairs would pull this and make a guide proof and send it out to all the programmers and say, check to make sure everything's right. And they'd mark up their paper copies, send them all back to Public Affairs, they'd get them all in, and they'd make another proof. And they'd send it all back out and say, check to make sure it's all right. And they'd mark it up in red pen, they'd send it all back to Public Affairs. And so the end result was that this process took months, 3 or 4 months. And so if you're trying to program for a course that starts in February, you got to put that data in by the previous June. You haven't talked to any of your instructors yet. And so the field was telling us, listen, we get it, okay, we get it. We know that it's a problem. But part of the problem is that we're trying to program 6 months in advance, and things are going to change. Things are absolutely going to change between now and then. So we overhauled the system, or overhauled the guide publication process, and part of that was this data entry error tool, which we collapsed all of those guide proof periods into just one data entry period, and instead provided them with this deep that said, instead of marking everything up with a red pen and sending it back to Public Affairs or us to correct, this report is going to show you all of the errors that you have in your programmatic data, okay? And so this is an example from Brentwood Arts Exchange for their KDO Creative Kids Day. And what this report does is for every program in this session, if something is wrong, it turns it red like that, indicating that the programmer needs to change it, right? So this says age as of 2031. It was just a typo, right? A tiny little broken window. But if this goes to print like this and stays like this, then we have customers calling us trying to register their son, and the register button's not highlighted, and front desk saying, hey, I can't register anybody in this course, what's going on? And we would have found this error, we would have corrected this error, but now we get it done up front. We get the programmer to correct it themselves, and it all happens before it goes to print.
And so all of those fields that you see, nothing is on here without a purpose. They all have logic that it's checking against a policy. So we built logic, just like Ben showed you yesterday with the forms. We went through all the policy and said, okay, what's black and white? And anything that could have logic made off of it, we made the logic. Some things we're never going to be able to answer. Whether it starts at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m., that's not something that we have the knowledge to answer. But we can flag something that doesn't fall into the proper age range or starts before a registration period.
Right, or some stuff that they don't even care about. Like, oh, I just wrote over my classes, or I copied this class, and it's got the wrong GL account, right? So we can nip those kinds of things in the bud right at the start and make them responsible for it.
And so the big wins here are, number one, this is one of the cases where we push the work back onto the facilities. And luckily, like I said, we got management buy-in as well. So they said, listen, we'll take care of the hammer part of this. Okay, we'll make sure that they're all running these and submitting these on time before they submit their programs. And that's, you know, they're doing it somewhat. But they said, we'll take care of the hammer part. We'll make sure our programmers run this report. You guys just make sure it's there and it's right and it's ready for them to use. So it was kind of a joint effort. We don't have to do too much policing on our end unless there's a question or a problem with the report or something like that. But as Laura said, this checks everything from the standard registration start dates and times, ages, GL accounts, course title, and then anything we can't check, anything that's not a 0 or a 1, that goes on the other one, that data entry review report, which just lets them see everything they put in, so they can check to make sure it says 7 a.m. instead of p.m.
Well, maybe you were getting there, but you missed the hammer, right? So this was the hardest part of this, is that it takes more than just technology. So what we said was, look, this is going to show up red. You have until this date to do it, okay? Now, our problem was that we can't stop data entry. We wanted to do that. We said to Jim, I know I said that to him maybe the first year after we had the software. Hey, Jim, we need to have clean copy that goes out. We need to stop them from creating any more courses for a period of time. Well, the argument was, well, we can do that, but you can't stop them from making a course today. So as soon as we would have turned that off, the ability to do courses, then they couldn't make a course in a minute. So if they just, this data here is for winter, right? We're in the fall right now. Let's say I want to start a quick course. We got some energy here. We want to start a bike rodeo, whatever it is. If I turn that off for a period, it turns everything off, right? So that was that problem that we couldn't get around. So what we decided to do was say, look, you've got 6 weeks. We're going to take the period and shorten it from 2 months to 6 weeks. You got to get everything in at 6 weeks. At 6 weeks, we're going to turn off your ability to make classes. If you have a red, it's deleted, gone. We don't care. And you can imagine how that went over.
Oh yeah.
Right? But that is what you have to do. There's no other way around it. We had to stop and say, because otherwise it's a meaningless deadline. If I can change things after the fact, then why do I do it in the first 6 weeks? So it was, we had a year's worth of time listening to folks saying, please let me get this stuff in the guide. We're not saying you can't make courses. We're just saying it's not going in that publication.
Right, and not only did they...
So, number one, it was a slow process. We didn't just, we had a lot of warning. So we spent a year, 4 seasons for going, okay, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and like going out to all staff meetings and talking about how to do it and hand-holding, and then move to okay, now it's really going to happen. Now we're really not going to give you anything, and still like, okay, and now we're at a point where I run this daily. And run it, delete. Here's your data that just got deleted. Put it in again. Run it, delete. Run it, delete. Because the alternative is we have 100 facilities using class. And no one has any idea what they need to do. So even if it's something as simple as they inverted 2031, I don't know what the HS update is supposed to be. I don't have time to call them and figure it out. So delete, put it in again. Delete, put it in again. We have problems.
Oh yeah.
Like 2 weeks ago, we had a programmer call up, scream into the phone, and like I said, you can hear everything. F-bomb. Just screams. And like someone on the other, oh my god, but she had already printed 5,000 flyers.
With that barcode, right? So when she has a barcode, we can't get another barcode. So she goes out, sends it to her print, and we say, you put it in, you put a seniors program in the youth program. Delete it. That's it. And so, she's probably not our biggest fan, but the bottom line is, it's hopefully breeding an accountability. It's hopefully breeding some responsibility, but most importantly, it is cleaning the data. We know that when the customer gets it, and I mean, I do care about the person that was upset. I do care about that, but ultimately, we are serving a population, so it's not fair to have somebody. I'm tired of listening to parents who've driven their kids all the way to the southern part of the county for a guitar lesson and say, I just took off work early, sat in Beltway traffic, and here I am, the building's closed. What do you say to that parent? She's thinking that same F-bomb.
And so one thing we've done, we went from public affairs used to take a month, like Ben said, we go back and forth. You send me a written thing, I fix it, meanwhile you've already changed something else, blah, blah, blah. Now we're at a point where they do their data entry, they don't talk to us at all except for like questions about interpretation and policy, blah, blah, blah. And then
Or why is it red?
on a Thursday morning, take the permissions off the user groups so no one can modify courses, export, delete anything that's read. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, we've shipped off the publishing export to public affairs, turned data permissions back on, and within half of a day, now we have our document ready to go.
And we're not saying you can't make courses. Right? We're not saying you can't make courses. We're not saying anything. We're just saying this is the data that we're willing to accept as clean that's going to the printer. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
So
there you
actually,
go.
the driver for this was not our, I mean, everyone knew that it was bad and heard the anecdotal reasons why things needed to change. But the actual driver was our Formula 2040, how we're going to, for the next 30 years, fix all of the issues or develop going forward. And one of the things was we spend, the guide is 78 pages long. And every single one of those pages costs money. So when we put in data and 30% of our data is bad, you can calculate how much you're spending on something
Just
that's
wasted
literally
space in there.
just thrown away. So the driver to do the reporting was we have to save some sort of money. So I don't remember what the exact figure was, but we had a dollar amount that aligned to the amount of crap data that we throw away every time. We actually created a forms cancellation reason called inaccurate information. So we can directly report on anything that was canceled because they put in something that was wrong and then found it. So we separate, when we're doing the reporting for upload management, we separate our excusable cancellation reasons, like instructor backed out, facility closed, from just that set of information. So we can report financially just on what.
Right, on the user, on the reason that you cancel the course. So if you cancel the course for a reason, if you could put that you canceled the course for the facility being closed, even if you made an error. But that's what we use as the delimiter. Eliminator.
I'd like to say that there's someone else who's doing that, because I'm happy with that, but I don't. It probably could be done. Yeah, it could be done, but I don't.
Courses that they didn't get recreated and didn't actually count it.
I think recreate course.
Right, but if they didn't get it in the publication.
I have absolutely no idea.
So your question is, did we know that when we canceled the course that they actually recreated it?
Yes.
Well, so in our situation, we can very clearly tell because they get into the publication, it will not do well.
Right.
And so just curious if you had any sort of so you deleted this amount.
Yeah.
and
So
then
the
made publication, how did they,
Hear about it.
did you lose any potential customers even though they were recreated?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, we've talked about how to figure that out, but you probably need, I mean, there's no way to know
market
someone's intent,
research.
right? I can't say, hey, how do I ask the question? If you didn't see this, would you have registered for it? Right? That's really the question you're asking. But so we know that that's one of the primary places that people advertise in our organization. But we really have been trying. I think I would guess that when we first did this effort class, one huge thing was we've got to make sure that we can get this class. It was a huge win. We would have a class publication and then you would submit it and the two never jive. So getting those two to match and getting a brochure export was great. But now we're like, we don't really want to print anything. We want to have stuff on the web or through social media. I mean, there's different ways now. And so I think we're already in that next generation where we're thinking about, if you look at this guide, it's just voluminous and it's just numbers.
One thing that we had to do though is stop saying print in the guide, because as we move towards a model where we want to do things electronically, we had programmers who would say, well, it's not going in the guide, so it doesn't matter. Like, you shouldn't delete it because no one's going to see it in the paper. And we have had to get them in the mentality of wherever it's advertised. We don't want anyone to go to those.
So if it's deleted from guide, then are you able to go and put the information on the website? there may be errors, we're able to go in the website version, however, I don't know that.
Hypothetically, yes, it doesn't end up happening for our seasonal publications just because us getting the data into public affairs is really fast. Their layout and design of the publication is what takes a long time. So they would have to make the investment to update the data. They do it for our day camp book because it's a smaller subset, but they don't generally. That's something we have to do.
Yeah, this is the guy. I mean, so they don't bother. If there's like a karate class canceled somewhere, they don't. We could, but for what we say at that point is, it's an eConnect. Everything's on eConnect, you know. So.
I think the big advantage you guys have is you have upper management that's willing to apply the handbook. And that's what we're running into.
Because really, it's us that's applying the hammer. Like,
But you got
we've
support.
it.
Do you have support?
We
don't.
Are they going back to your line and say, quit telling them that?
Sometimes
Or did anyone?
they do. And so we have become the bad guys. But
Yes.
we have accepted that role.
Yeah, we like being the bad guys, so that's all right.
Even if I then the division chief will say, copy me on anything that gets deleted. And I copy them, and the staff member freaks out, goes to the division chief, and the division chief says, oh my god.
Yeah, they go around us like a cracker, and she won't say nothing.
Yeah, we actually put in a process because we're trying to limit the number of people who, we understand, like I said, sometimes there's something, I've got this great idea, 10 people come to the information from this class, this will be awesome. And so we want to do a class, and that makes sense. But then we have, I've got this great idea, does anybody show any interest? No, but I know
No, but
will come to it.
they'll like
So
it.
I'm going to
I
run
promise.
it, just when you want to start it, they answer the bar. And we're like, how are you going to advertise? I won't need to. So we had to put in a cumbersome system that nobody likes, where it takes approval up the chain to do these instantaneous things to try to get people to stop doing it. And what ended up happening instead was we got flooded with these things. And our director finally goes, these are too much work for me just to approve. And so she stops reading, so she doesn't read them. She just hits click and I'm like, what are you doing? And so, our idea is like yours, we want to make sure everything has a chance to be advertised, however it's going to be advertised. And in order, reason we put it in, right, there's Jill, Amy, and about two to three other people who can put this in. We're likely to only have six facilities right now. But it's still 500,000.
It was too late. We might bring up the right.
And basically,
For the third report.
and what we
Because we
started
started after.
doing,
Live
there's a mistake on this line, sure, I'm not putting it in, there's a mistake on this line, we have to help that ticket, it goes right back to them, that was wrong. And when you get more than a couple in a row, the whole template goes back, it's wrong. And we're not telling you, this is what we found, fix it right now. And if it comes back and it's bad again, it goes right back.
Yeah, so I think those are definitely some components you have to have. Sport,
4 years.
Yeah. And fortitude and time. If you can get time on your side, after a while, people become familiar with the process. And once they understand it, they may not like it, but at least they understand what to do, right? And that becomes helpful.